So let me stop at this point. We have about 20 minutes for questions, comments, rebuttals, or jokes. And I steal jokes, so please. Yes, sir.
I really felt that one of the most important things about the Bush presidency was the massive success of his campaign of intimidation of dissent. Anybody who disagreed with him on anything, whether it be Iraq or domestic policy, was anti-American. And the press, as has been documented in studies, totally caved in. In 2003, news consisted of Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld said, a Bush administration figure said, there was no effective dissent except for the very possible exception of that elitist network, PBR. Fox News was 100% subsidiary of the Bush White House and the RNC, and anybody, we saw Daschle and other prominent Democrats savaged as being unconcerned with the safety of the American people. We saw anti-war movement people investigated as potential enemy combatants, and we saw a pall of fear imposed on the country, separating the true believers who were with Bush from everybody else.
I
fell apart.
I understand what you're saying. I didn't quite hear the question.
The question is, do you agree that that was an important part of his legacy?
I think we as Americans have a great deal of difficulty during national security situations expressing criticism. I think that was true during the Second World War. It certainly was true at the outset of the Vietnam War when Nixon used the same tactics. And so did Lyndon Johnson. I can't remember what he called William Fulbright, but it wasn't nice. Nervous Nelly or something like that. So I think during times of national security crisis, and at least initially the president has an advantage. I do think that certainly in the 2004 election and in the 1988 election, both Republican presidential candidates wrapped themselves in the flag and criticized criticism of the United States and of the initiatives that were going on at that time. And frankly, we see a little of that even now with the economic meltdown. People who might be very much opposed to these huge bailouts being quiet and caving in to the crisis of the moment. So I think that I don't disagree with what you're saying. I might not use the same language, but I think that in any initial crises, there tends to be a reaction to negative views of the presidency because the president is the leader, he's the father, he's the commander-in-chief, he's the national security provider. The second problem we have is that presidents, at least initially, have much more access to and control over information than everybody else has. So one of the things that the administration does is they have the argument, if you knew what I knew, which I can't tell you, then you wouldn't take this time. I think there was some of that. I think presidents do that. I don't recall during Bosnia or Kosovo whether we saw that kind of criticism. We certainly saw it in Somalia when things went bad and the mission changed from humanitarian aid to democratization during the Clinton administration. So while the Bush administration, it is true, used and the Republicans used the card of patriotism to mute as much as they could dissent. And while I think Attorney General Ashcroft and Gonzales implemented the Patriot Act in a very, very harsh way. I don't see that as unique to the Bush administration. I see that as a constant problem in a democracy. It's very hard to maintain a democracy during crises, particularly national security crisis. Yes, sir.
First of all, two distinct points. One, it sounded as though you might be agreeable to the Oliver Stone take in terms of W and his effort to work out a relationship with his father, and that sort of thing, which it seemed to me, I'm assuming you had seen the film.
I have not seen the film, but I've seen the president for 8 years.
Right, well, that's...
Which is enough.
Yeah.
I don't have to see a movie.
No, but I was wondering whether you were in agreement with the Oliver Stone.
I don't know. Frankly, I don't have a lot of faith in Oliver Stone. I don't think Lyndon Johnson is responsible for the Kennedy assassination. So I don't tend to go to Oliver Stone movies, or Mel Gibson for that matter.
In this case, you ought to give it a try. It sounds like you're on the same wavelength here. The other one is a matter of puzzlement for me, admittedly coming from a left liberal point of view. But when it came to the issue of national security with the Kerry Bush election, I could never figure why people thought of Bush with his great service with the Alabama Air National Guard versus somebody who had actually served in a combat situation in spite of the efforts to shoot that down. Nonetheless, I think nobody of significance thought that Kerry was not somebody who had experienced combat. How did the electorate come up with the idea that somehow Bush was a better national security person in terms of, quote, experience than Senator Kerry?
Well, I think, first of all, the swift vote Veterans for Truth did a thing on Kerry, and Kerry didn't respond quickly enough to that. Number two, the Republicans have always been viewed as stronger on national security than the Democrats. Democrats are viewed, for whatever reason, as weak, and Republicans are viewed as strong. And thirdly, Bush had acted strongly after 9/11 and up until the outbreak of the war in Iraq. I think he enjoyed basically public support. So I think it's when we have perceptions towards the parties, those perceptions are very, very hard to change. And each party tries to feed into the more positive aspect of its perception. And the Bush people believed in 2004 that the only way the president would be reelected was if national security was the principal issue, because people tended to give him good grades. And I think, I believe, and I may be wrong about this, that certainly the election, when a president is up for re-election, the election, despite whoever he's running against, is an up or down vote on that presidency. When Jimmy Carter ran in 1980, we voted down. When Ronald Reagan ran in 1984, we voted up. When George Bush ran in 1992, we voted down. When Bill Clinton ran in 1996, we voted up. So I do think that the second election of any president is a referendum primarily on his administration. We were not in an economic crisis. We had not had another terrorist attack. He had acted resolutely. He didn't win by a hell of a lot. The country was still divided, but more people sided with him than opposed him. That's the only way I could answer that question. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the McCain-Obama election, whether that was another referendum on Bush or
It was a
on Palin.